Um, I mean, Russia is a country we must and will deal with. It's there. Its cooperation on a series of issues, from proliferation to nuclear security, to counterterrorism, to counter-narcotics, to Afghanistan, to counter-piracy, frankly, is important. We need Russia. Frankly, Russia needs us too. And what we are trying to do with the reset in the relationship is to make that clear to them, that we are willing, eager, and interested in working with Russia on issues of common concern so that we can cooperatively try to address things. We're not interested in doing this at the expense of our principles. So even while we are willing to engage and cooperate with Russia, we will make very clear when we disagree with them, as we do on some very fundamental issues. We will not recognize Abkhazia and South Ossetia independence, alongside with the other 189 countries that refuse to recognize it. We would, in fact, like to reverse that status. We will not accept the notion that monitors should be thrown out of country. We oppose that. We will not accept the notion that Russia can have a privileged sphere of influence. It has a sphere of influence, and it stops at its borders, and not an inch beyond it. We will not accept the notion that Russia could have a veto over which countries can join which alliances. So there's some fundamental principles that we will adhere to and stress. And at the same time, even while we are aware that we have differences, and we will frankly and openly discuss those differences with them, we are interested in cooperating on issues of common concern. One of those is arms control. And I don't know what's going to happen at the summit, but the goal, as stated by the presidents on April 1st, was to have a framework agreement for the START follow-on treaty, which would have a significant reduction in nuclear forces. The president is deeply committed to this. As he said in his speech, he's committed to the elimination of nuclear weapons on a worldwide basis, and he means it. This is not some rhetorical flourish. He actually means it. While we go down that path, we will maintain nuclear weapons that are safe, secure, and effective. But we definitely want to go down that path. And we need to do that with Russia. Well, I mean, you're right. It will take two to tango, and to mix metaphors. I don't know how you reset a tango, but and maybe they're waltzing while we're tangoing, which makes it more interesting. But I mean, clearly, what the United States can do is indicate that it's willing to engage Russia directly. The president will have his second meeting with President Medvedev in 6 months of being president, at the time that we're facing the worst economic crisis in 75 years. And yet he believes it's that important to engage. If the other side is not willing to engage, we'll have to see where the relationship will go. Our door will remain open. Our willingness to talk to them and cooperate with them on issues of common concern will be there. As I said, without compromising in any of our fundamental principles. We don't expect them to compromise on what they believe is important. We do expect both of us to figure out if there's a way forward together, that we try to do that. So the key first part of that is arms control. We haven't had a serious arms control negotiations with the Russians in a very long time. I mean, I would argue that the treaty that was signed 8 years ago was not the result of a long, deep, detailed negotiation. It's 3 pages long. We want to have a serious arms control agreement, the kinds we've pursued in the 80s and the 90s. Not just to think about how do we create strategic stability in the old way. No, how to reduce nuclear weapons at a faster pace. I think the Russians are interested in that. They've demonstrated an interest in it. We will find out next week. Not only won't I tell you, I just don't know where we are in the negotiations. This is very closely held, as it should. And we'll find out next week whether, in fact, they are willing to go down this path. It's an indication that that there are at least some areas where they're willing to go down the path. When we met in Corfu, the NATO-Russia Council, it was a tough meeting. Some of us made very clear where we stood on the issues, and certainly the Russians made clear where they stood on the issues. At the same time, we walked away out of that meeting agreeing that we ought to resume military-to-military cooperation between NATO and Russia. And there's some specific things that we can do. Operation Active Endeavor, in which they can provide a ship into the Mediterranean. Let's talk about counter-piracy, where in fact they do have a ship, and how does that relate? How can that relate to NATO? It's in a very practical way. There's things we can and will do. In fact, in Afghanistan, you ship your materiel through Russia. We do, non-lethal. We're talking to them about lethal. So on a day-to-day office, there's ways to move forward. And there's a strong conviction in the United States that you can't move forward unless you're willing to talk to people, willing to sit down with them. And this president is willing to sit down with anybody, even when they disagree, and particularly when you disagree. It's much easier to agree with your friends. It may be fun in the stupa, but the real work gets done with the people you disagree with, because that's how you move forward. And we'll find out how much they're willing to. And so forget it. They'll say things publicly. Well, let's look what happens privately. Let's see where the results end up. And I'm not going to prejudge where we're going to end up. I'm as eager and as interested to see where we do as you are. I'm not going to get in the operational details of troop deployments. That's beyond my pay grade. What I do in NATO is we provide the political guidance and let the generals figure that one out. And if I wouldn't want him to do my job, I'm certainly not going to do his job. So I'll leave that to the generals. But let me make clear that the generals are very happy to have additional troops, and they'll find plenty of work for them in Afghanistan. That's not going to be the problem. And where and how and what, it just is not for me to say. But that we need them, I think, is pretty clear. There are 5 things that we require: troops, trainers, trust fund, civilians, economic assistance. In each of those areas, we have gaps. The biggest gap right now is in trainers and the trust fund. Focus on that, because I think it's the most important to what I did in my speech, which is to say that if we are going to succeed in Afghanistan, however we define that success, it will require an Afghan security force that is capable of providing for security for the Afghan people. The Afghan economy is just not big enough to sustain the force that is necessary. So we will have to do it. So the trust fund is absolute, total necessity. 50 million euros, which is what the Germans are providing to the trust fund, is great. 50 million a year is fantastic. We need $2 billion. The United States will virtually single-handedly pay for and equip to stand up this force. We are asking other people to sustain it. And it's very simple. You can pay $2 billion, you, the international community, can pay $2 billion to have 134,000 troops by the Afghans to provide for their own security, or you can deploy 134,000 troops at a cost vastly different. That's as simple as it is. Okay. Ambassador Daalder, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.